Okay, I'll start over. Welcome everyone to the fourth annual Horizons by Hopkins conference and our keynote session titled Turning Mountains into Molehills, My Journey of Transforming Life's Challenges into Triumphs. My name is Marta Shliva. I am a chemistry PhD candidate in the Department of Chemistry here at the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. And I'm so excited to introduce our keynote speaker today, Tiffany Yu. Tiffany is the CEO and founder of Diversability, an award-winning social enterprise that amplifies disabled voices. She is the founder of the Awesome Foundation Disability Chapter, a monthly microgrant that has awarded upwards of $50,000 to 50 disability projects in 8 countries. And she is also the host of her podcast, Tiffany and You. She serves on the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council and was a 2020 co-chair of the World Economic Forum Sustainable Development Impact Summit. Tiffany is a 3 times TEDx speaker, spoke on 5 sessions at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, and has been featured in Marie Claire, The Guardian, and Forbes. Tiffany, we are so excited to have you here at Horizons by Hopkins this year. For our participants, please feel free to ask questions relevant to the keynote in the chat or in the Whova platform. And for the last 5 or 10 minutes of the session, we'll open the floor to any questions that you have, and we'll also allow you to unmute yourself and ask Tiffany your questions directly. Now, without further ado, over to you, Tiffany.
Thank you so much. I know there was a pause there, and in that moment, I was trying to upload the share screen. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm just getting a little bit set up here, so give me 1 second. So as mentioned, I'm going to start out by providing a brief visual description. I do this in case there are people who are joining who aren't able to access the screen or see who's speaking. So again, my name is Tiffany Yu. My pronouns are she, her. I also identify as disabled, and I'm a Taiwanese American woman with below the shoulder length black hair, wearing a green top, and I am appearing above my slides here. I will also read some of the text on the slides as well. Again, if people are watching the recording or tuning in and not able to access the slides. So as mentioned, I'm going to be talking about turning mountains into molehills, my own journey of transforming life's challenges into triumphs. And there are a lot of photos throughout the presentation here of me, and here is one of me wearing a lot of different bright colors, waving a bright green scarf. So let's go ahead and get started. So I am what you would call a self-described accidental advocate, and I'm really excited to be here because I know that today and what is going to transpire probably through your entire time here is going to be really impactful. So I wanted to go ahead and start by introducing myself. I know I provided a brief visual description earlier, but I'm the first generation daughter of a Taiwanese immigrant, my dad, and a refugee from the Vietnam War, my mom. And I grew up in the DC area, actually very close to Johns Hopkins, or maybe not that close, in Bethesda. And I grew up with this Japanese proverb that says that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And the photo on here is of me and my entire family. I'm the youngest of 4. I'm over here in the red sweater. I don't know if you can see the resemblance. But I grew up with this Japanese proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And essentially to me, that meant don't draw any attention to yourself. So I wanted to share a story from my childhood. On November 29th, 1997, I was 9 years old, and it also happened to be Thanksgiving weekend. And it was the day after my dad had just turned 49. My mom had to travel for a business trip, so a couple of my siblings and I thought that we would say our goodbyes to her off at the airport, and on the car ride home, my dad actually lost control of the car. So instead of returning to school after a long holiday weekend, I actually found myself at the hospital for 3 weeks. I sustained a handful of injuries, including shattering a couple bones in one of my legs that would leave me in a wheelchair for 4 months, which is the photo that is here. It's of me at the hospital with my maternal grandmother. I'm covered in white blankets, and you can see a little bit of an inkling of the cast that I had to wear that went from my thigh all the way to my toes, and I got a rainbow colored scarf. But in addition to shattering a couple bones in one of my legs, I also permanently paralyzed one of my arms, known as a brachial plexus injury. In addition to all of that, my dad also passed away. And so when I think back to that weekend, that to me was supposed to be about family and gratitude and abundance and celebration of life. And I know next week, many of us may be heading home to celebrate Thanksgiving. that holiday and that weekend to me was now about loss. So when I was 9 years old, my family changed forever. And when I was 9 years old, my body changed forever. And when I was 9 years old, my life changed forever. So after about this 4-month rehabilitation period, I was walking again and I had relearned how to write with my non-dominant hand. I went back to school and I was actually thrust into this environment where I was still grieving the loss of my dad and grappling with my new identity as a person with a disability. One of my least favorite memories growing up, and I don't have any photos of this, so we'll stay on this slide for a moment, but one of my least favorite memories growing up was this mandatory physical education class. I had always hated PE, but now it was worse. And I remember I would get dressed every day for this class, and I would stand there as it was time for the team captains who were my classmates to pick their teams. And I would watch as my classmates would leave my side on my left and my right to go off to their respective teams. And I was always left standing on my own. No one wanted me to be on their team. I was always the last kid picked. But it doesn't matter if you have a disability or not, but things like that, not being picked for a team every single day can have a lasting impact on how we feel like we can contribute to society. So I sat on the sidelines of the gym and I sat on the sidelines of life. My nail had been hammered down. My mom, who was now a newly single parent, had to raise 4 kids on her own, and she did everything she could to make sure that we didn't have to worry about having a roof over our head or food on the table. And I'm so grateful for that. But it also meant that she worked so hard to support all of us that it meant that she was never home. So I didn't get the emotional support that I needed. And if you asked me about my arm, I would actually just start crying. I wouldn't give you an opportunity to get to know me and to get to know my story. And that was my situation growing up. So at home, I felt really excluded. Or at school, I felt really excluded. And at home, I just felt really isolated and alone. I would actually end up spending the next decade sitting in that space, sitting in spaces of pity, victimization, and shame. I'd wear long sleeves all the time to hide my arm. I told everyone my dad was away on a trip, and I didn't tell anyone about the car accident. It was like my secret. And because I didn't tell anyone about this car accident, I actually further isolated myself because I didn't think that this story mattered or that anyone cared. And as a result, I internalized so many messages growing up that my voice and my story didn't matter. My nail had been hammered down. A decade is a really long time to be feeling so alone and effectively suffering in silence. And the hardest part of all of this wasn't necessarily the car accident, even though I want to make space and soft and tenderness for that. But it was the fact that I felt like I had to be silent about something so hard that had happened to me, and that I felt like I didn't have people in my life that I could talk to. I talk a lot about, if any of you have watched my first TEDx talk, I talk a lot about this idea of chronic exclusion, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But to me, that is one of the ways that a microaggression had manifested for me. It was this feeling that I was chronically excluded. And as a result, it created this wound that grew bigger and bigger. So because I had felt so isolated and lonely, I actually later learned that loneliness actually turns into this negative spiral where we move into this elevated threat state. We end up turning inward, and it starts affecting our confidence and our sense of self. My nail had been hammered down. So after about this decade of silence, I was actually invited to speak publicly about the car accident for the first time. I was a senior in college. I went to Georgetown, and it was 2009. And I wish I could tell you it was like flipping a light switch, that all of a sudden this decade of being chronically excluded and microaggressions, that all of a sudden I was just like, I'm going to become a disability advocate. But really what had ended up happening was that I had always noticed that people seemed pretty uncomfortable with disability. And as a result, they were uncomfortable with me. And all I really wanted was to be liked, to be accepted, and to be understood. But what I realized was that because we don't really understand disability, we don't know how to talk about it. We're so afraid of saying something offensive or not politically correct. So we end up saying nothing at all. And if we have learned anything over the last couple of years, it's that silence is an answer in itself. And in this case, it wasn't a very productive answer, because when we stay silent, we actually don't learn and we don't grow. And when we stay silent about the things we're uncomfortable about and not name the discomfort, we end up not providing an opportunity to even have a conversation in the first place, and this opportunity to potentially make progress together. So for me, staying silent around disability topics means that we end up relying on stereotypes. And these stereotypes come from the media, which oftentimes portray disability as a medical diagnosis that needs to be fixed, or that there's something that's broken about my body, or being framed as disability just being seen as this tragedy or this charity case where the expectations are set really low. So the thing with all of these mindsets, though, is that they're rooted in assumptions that people with disabilities can't achieve and can't dream. And because of that, we're not even given the chance to succeed. And I know I started to internalize a lot of those harmful messages in myself, and I can only imagine how many other disabled people internalize messages like that as well. So people will see the disabilities and they will judge our capabilities. And as a result, we internalize those messages and actually set the bar much lower of where I believe we actually can be. So the thing is that no one really asked me how I wanted to be viewed, because I don't want to go around feeling like I need to be fixed. Disability to me is a core part of the human experience. And I became really curious about what happens when we look at disability as identity, as part of the fabric of who we are, the same way I introduced myself by saying that I'm a Taiwanese American woman. And similar to other aspects of identity, I would later learn that disability can be rooted in pride, empowerment, and has a rich history and culture. And so something I thought about every single day, the fact that I'm a one-armed person in a two-armed world, no one was really talking about or acknowledging. And when you don't talk about or acknowledge a part of my identity, I as a whole feel invalidated, insignificant, and invisible. My nail had been hammered down. So I wanted to provide this context, and these two photos here are actually from that 2009, or some of those 2009 early moments. We started this the first ever student club at Georgetown, the first ever disability student club at Georgetown, which became known as Diversability. Here on this side, I think I'm pointing in the right direction, it's a photo of kind of our planning group, a group of students and some faculty and staff, Georgetown staff members. And the first event that we ever hosted, which was a very full room where we watched a documentary featuring disabled comedians. But I wanted to provide all of this context just around community and loneliness, because the community that I'm part of, the disability community, is over 1 billion people globally. And that means that social isolation, loneliness, and exclusion are experiences that those of us, over 1 billion of us with disabilities, know all too well. And that's a lot of people who are feeling forgotten, overlooked, and invisible. And when I think about what it means to be excluded, it means feeling like a burden, which is one of the most dangerous things that anyone can ever feel. And it means feeling like you don't belong. And it means feeling like you have to ask for permission just to show up. And so exclusion is actually what became the fuel to my fire. I became really passionate about inclusion, belonging, and empowerment because I never wanted anyone who met me or touched my work to feel like they were alone. And I never wanted anyone to feel like they didn't matter. So today I'm using whatever power and privilege I have to changing the way that the world views and defines disability. And I have a photo here from some of the members of Diversability participating in New York City's Disability Pride Parade, which used to happen annually and I believe is coming back. But again, I want to encourage you to think about what are the areas that you might have some power and privilege to be able to fight for more equity. So when I couldn't find community, I created one. And my definition of community is a group of people who come together to nurture your own growth and each other's growth. There's something really powerful about community. As a function of community, you'll feel socially connected, you feel like you belong, and you feel empowered. And there's actually a Harvard study that showed that one of the keys to our well-being and longevity is actually rooted in social connection and healthy relationships. So I have this Venn diagram here. So when I talk about community, I'm actually referring to social health. And our overall well-being is this intersection of our physical health, our mental health, and our social health. Community is this place, or you can call it social health, is the place where you have people who are rooting for you, who support you, who challenge you, who lift you up. People who see you for your potential. That's so desperately what I wanted as a kid, and it's what I want to be surrounded by every day. And it's actually the connection within that community that's what we need to feel like we belong. So there are actually 4 factors that create belonging within communities. Belonging happens when we are seen for who we are and what we contribute, when we are connected meaningfully in one-on-one relationships to others in the community, when we feel supported in our own unique growth path, and when we are proud of the community's value and purpose. And I'm actually, this is a little sneak peek, but I'm working on a book right now, and I'm currently working on the book about how important community is. And not only does belonging happen with these 4 factors, but it also happens in the large group, so being proud of the community's value and purpose, in smaller groups, so maybe that's events that you're going to, and then having these one-on-one meaningful connections with others. The community I created is called Diversability. We are on a mission to elevate disability pride, build disability power, and advance disability leadership. And we do that through building disability community, advancing disability visibility, and engaging our non-disabled allies. Because research has shown that one of the best ways to tackle any type of bias is through real-life continuous experiences with people who challenge your stereotypes. And we're tackling bias, we're tackling disability bias, and we're doing that every single day. And over the years, we've curated over 100 events that have provided a platform for our disability community members to share our stories, humanizing disability through lived experience, just like I'm doing today. And now this happens virtually on our digital platforms that reach over 80,000. These are the spaces where we celebrate our shared humanity with our non-disabled allies, recognizing that we all have diverse lived experiences to bring to the table that are just waiting to be shared, fostering this sense of belonging and seeing people for the gifts they have to impart in the world. Because ultimately, all of us just want to be seen, and we want to be heard, and we want to be valued. The photo here, again, is from Diversability at the New York City Disability Pride Parade. You'll even notice that I'm not even in these photos anymore. At this time, I had moved to San Francisco, but we were still gathering our group together. And one of the things that I really appreciated is that you may notice that there are a couple people in this photo who have a printed paper pinned onto their clothing that has another photo of someone. And we ended up partnering with another nonprofit called Suffering the Silence to support people who weren't able to participate in the parade in person due to chronic illness or disability, but still wanted to have a presence there. So their photos and their presence was very much felt. And over here on the side, we have another one of our community members holding a sign that says, "Disability rights are women's rights, are human rights." So Diversability is the place where I actually found my voice, and it's the place where I became proud of my disability identity. Here's another photo of an event that we hosted. This one was in San Francisco around International Day of People with Disabilities, which happens on December 3rd and is coming up. And I share all of these photos, and I want to describe them as well, because to me, this is what disability looks like. It's all of us showing up in community, laughing, having a great time. But again, Diversability is actually where I found my voice as an advocate. And the photo here is of me. Sometimes on my injured arm, I'll wear a wrist splint, and I had an artist actually draw artwork where I had him draw 9-year-old Tiffany hugging an elephant, because I felt like for a long time, my disability was the elephant in the room. And someone had really encouraged me to just go and hug that elephant. And that's effectively what I feel like I've been doing since 2009 over the last 14 years. And I also had the artist write the word proud on one of the Velcro straps on the wrist splint, just to remind myself of how proud I am of the journey that I've been on. I'm also extremely proud of the team that we've built here. I'll replace myself in our Zoom, in the Zoom screenshot. But we ended up growing our team to 9. At one point, we were at 10. We're now a little bit smaller, but we are entirely run and led by disabled people. The majority of us identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. The majority of us are women. And for us, we wanted to show that disability employment works. And over the years, we've had our fair share of successes. Our work has gotten featured in Forbes, Marie Claire, and The Guardian, as was mentioned in my intro. Even before I was 30 years old, I found myself at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, rubbing elbows with world leaders, CEOs, and academics, talking about the importance of disability inclusion. The photo here is 2 deaf dancers, Zana and Antoine, giving each other a high five. You can see a sneak peek of our interpreters here as well. And in 2020, as was also mentioned in my intro, I got to co-chair a summit on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals alongside the President of Colombia, who is pictured right here, because why not me? And today I get to be one of the keynote speakers at this incredible event that you're hosting. And so when I think about the collective trauma, grief, and isolation that all of us have experienced throughout the pandemic and periods of social unrest, which I know are still continuing, I'm reminded of lessons from my own journey that inclusion, belonging, and advocacy come and happen as a collective in community. And another thing that also happens in collective in community is healing. So once I had found my people through the community that I built, it also gave me the confidence to start to explore advocacy in a lot of other ways. I learned I'm part of what's called the ADA generation, meaning that for as long as I've been disabled, inclusion, access were seen as the norm through the Americans with Disabilities Act, not an exception. I also learned from Senator Tom Harkin, who was one of the chief architects of the ADA, that the unemployment rate for disabled people has remained relatively unchanged since 1991, which was a year after the ADA had been signed into law. So there's still a lot more work to be done. But in addition to that, I've had some wins here as well. I got appointed to the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council in 2019, where I got to serve for 3 years. And one of my big wins there was leading the city and county's efforts to recognize the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This included a mayoral proclamation of July as Disability Pride Month that coincided with the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I also got to light City Hall in blue and white. We weren't sure what the disability color was, but I've now learned that the global color for disability is purple. So in the following years, we put the request in and we're able to get City Hall lit in purple. I've also been able to take, my background is actually in financial services. I studied finance and accounting at Georgetown, and I've been really interested in what disability-centered economic justice might look like. So part of that for me has been investing more than now $180,000 to support disability initiatives. And that happens through an endowment fund that I started at Georgetown University, my alma mater, and also through another initiative that I started called the Awesome Foundation Disability Chapter, where we're awarding $1,000 monthly microgrants to disability projects globally. And to date, we've done that for over 80 projects in 11 different countries. And about 3 years ago, or over 3 years ago now, when all of us found ourselves quarantining during the pandemic, I expanded my advocacy to social media through a short form video series called the Anti-Ableism series, which was focused on bite-sized ways that we can be a better ally to disabled people. And that series has actually garnered more than 5 million views. And so if you have a phone, you have a voice, and you're already well on your way to using your own power and privilege to fight for more equity. On this slide are a couple of different pieces of press that we've gotten, or that I've gotten featured in. One was about 2022 TikTokers to follow. And then this really great article in Women's Health called How a Community of TikTokers is Debunking Disability One Viral Video at a Time. In addition to all of that, I've been able to even show up even larger, a larger city hall than the one in San Francisco. I got to even expand my advocacy to helping advocate for the ways that social media platforms like TikTok have really helped disability advocates find their voice when traditional media outlets wouldn't really give us a microphone or give us space. All of that has led to my latest announcement, which is that I'm currently writing a book called The Anti-Ableist Manifesto that's going to be published by a major publisher on October 8th, 2024. The date is coming up. So outside of getting to keynote this, I have been spending a lot of time working on my manuscript. And I know in the intro, we have a fellow PhD who is working on her dissertation. So I can relate in a different way. And so with all of that said, I kind of wanted to start to close these opening remarks by just reflecting on the past 26 years. I spent the first half of that, those first 12 years, sitting in a really tender space. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who is the Surgeon General of California, has talked about the impact of adverse childhood experiences, ACE or childhood trauma, on our brain development. And many of us who have been heavily impacted by childhood trauma have life outcomes and health outcomes that look very different from my own. So while I want to acknowledge that while this is a story of enormous amounts of loss and grief and trauma, it's also a story of everything that I've gained over the years and the ways in which I've grown, and again, how proud I am of the journey that I've been on. And a lot of that I have to thank the communities that not only I've built, but that I've been a part of, who have been supporting me and cheering me on over these last 13 years or 14 years. So I know that the title of this talk and my remarks was, turning these, I can't remember what it was actually, but I think that so many of us want these stories about overcoming adversity, trauma, and pain. But I actually don't think it's about overcoming, because these experiences are still very much a part of who I am. I still very much am on my own healing journey. And I want to encourage all of us to make our journeys uniquely our own. So instead of overcoming, sometimes I actually talk about becoming and embracing and living with the things that have happened to us so that they can become the fuel to your own fire. So I want to come back to this Japanese proverb: the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. As I started this talk, I have a feeling that most of you didn't really know who I was, even though I'm proud to be from Maryland, if some of you are from Maryland as well. But I actually think that that's the point, that maybe you didn't know who I was, because I hope that the fact that I get to be the keynote here shows you that no matter who you are, you can make a difference. As a disabled woman of color, I sit at the dangerous intersection of racism, misogyny, and ableism. The system that we currently exist in tells me that my nail needs to be hammered down, and it did in many ways. But the truth is that I'm the nail that sticks out. I don't have the luxury or privilege to disappear. It's my duty to be that nail. So what I've learned instead is to be proud to be that nail that sticks out. And while I've shared some of my successes and our community's successes earlier, I think that the biggest success of all is that I like my nail that sticks out. And I want you to know that by joining this, I have a feeling that you are probably a nail that sticks out in one way or another too. Because every time you use your voice, your power, and your privilege, and you show the world exactly who you are, you're paving the way for all of us who thought that invisibility would be our only method of survival. Because chances are soon you'll be joined by another nail that sticks out, and another nail, and another nail. And being the nail that sticks out in community is how we thrive. Your visibility and your success and your advocacy is a win for all of us. And one of the things I've learned is that so much of just being an advocate is actually sharing your own story. And another advocate once said to me, when I was feeling nervous or I had imposter syndrome, they said, when you're sharing your story, Tiffany, it's yours. You can't mess it up. So I wanted to close by saying thank you for being that nail. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think we have some time for Q&A, but I really appreciate all of you being here and being that nail that sticks out.
And thank you so much, Tiffany, for those inspiring words. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to share in the chat, or if you'd love to unmute yourself and come on camera, that's also welcome. We have some time. This is a fantastic opportunity to chat with Tiffany and get some more insights. While we're waiting for anyone to speak up, I wanted to know, Tiffany, what is your sort of first piece of advice when to give to someone who's searching for their own community or network? You talked about how it's important to surround yourself with those who can support you, and how do you think what do you think is the best way to go about finding that support system for PhDs and postdocs in the many different areas that they might be living in and existing in?
Yeah, and I feel like you can relate at how isolating doing your PhD can be. I don't have a PhD, but I'm writing a book right now. And even though I'm part of book communities, like we are the only ones who can, do our own research and come up with our thoughts to defend our thesis and things like that. So I have two pieces of advice. What's interesting is before I started Diversability, I actually started a Taiwanese American club at Georgetown, the first Taiwanese American club. And that actually gave me the confidence to realize that I could go and meet other people who had shared interests. And if there wasn't a space that covered that interest, in this case, a more identity-based group of being Taiwanese American, we could go out and create it. So the first thing I would share is, you are very lucky, because for me, I don't have a college environment. And as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of on my own again. But the first is I would look at what resources are available. And are people here on campus, or are most people tuning in virtually?
So it's mixed. We have attendees from all over the world, some at Hopkins, some not at Hopkins, but it definitely varies based on where they are and what their background is.
Okay, great. So the first is I would definitely try to leverage whatever Hopkins communities has available for you. And one of the things I had to learn or unlearn was I started my career at Goldman Sachs in investment banking, which a lot of people can view as very like cutthroat, but I had to really trust and believe in collaboration over competition. And so I did not believe in like competing with anyone. I was like, just like, hey, we're all working really long hours together. Like, let's make this more fun, for all of us. And I actually feel very grateful. Some of the people that I used to work with in my analyst class have provided opportunities for me to come and speak at their new companies that they're at. So collaboration over competition, find communities within the Hopkins environment. And then if you're not able to find that there, which is okay as well, this is a little bit of a funny / easy one, is that Facebook groups, you can literally go and type anything and find a group. There are chances that someone has started a group, and I'll provide a very small example. So Diversability, actually, we started as a Facebook group, but we were cross disability, right? So in addition to me, who has a paralyzed arm, there were wheelchair users, people who had chronic illnesses, allies, like all different types. So I went in to Facebook groups and I searched brachial plexus injury. That's the specific name of my disability. And I found a group of people who not only had brachial plexus injuries, but parents, doctors, and medical professionals who supported us. And I can get very like specific information from that particular group related to my injury that might not resonate with the Diversability community. In addition to that, there are two different types of brachial plexus injuries you can get. One is called OBPI, and the other is TBPI. And I have TBPI, which is traumatic brachial plexus injury. There's too much information for you, but I can even go into a Facebook group and type in traumatic brachial plexus injury, and there's a group for that too. So I'm in these two separate groups, and hopefully, I don't know what people's thesis topics are, or if you have other interests, but Facebook groups is a good place to start if you're not quite sure where to find community. I'll provide one third asterisk one, which are, a lot of us really did emerge on social media. And before I found the brachial plexus injury Facebook group, I actually went onto TikTok and searched the hashtag brachial plexus injury and got to know and meet a lot of other people who have my injury, who are trying to figure out how to tie our shoelaces, or I don't know, use a can opener, and so we were all just exchanging different life hacks that we came up with. And that's how I actually created a little bit of a community as well. So hashtags on your preferred social media platform are a great way to build what I will call healthy parasocial relationships. And the hope is that you can turn those parasocial relationships into, if not in real life relationships, into virtual relationships, and actually build community there.
Fantastic. Thank you. If anyone has any other questions, now is your chance to drop them in the chat. If not, there was one that I really liked on Whova. So thank you to whoever submitted it. It's a pretty broad one, but one of our attendees asked, Tiffany, what fills your cup? Maybe we can talk about that in the vein of, overcoming or becoming, and how you've maybe found ways to fill your cup through that advocacy and service.
Yeah, I love that. So I have 2 ways I fill my cup, or I guess 3 ways I fill my cup. So one is usually after I give a talk, I will ask people, or even just seeing some of the feedback come into the chat here, I'll say, hey, did you learn anything? Or did you take anything away? And just seeing that people have been positively impacted by something that I've said, or changed the way that they thought about something. That's where I think my advocacy fills my cup. But I also want to remind people that another one of the things I had to unlearn was that my worth and my value, I didn't want it to be external. So some internal ways I fill my cup. One is rest. That has been very important to me. You may not know this, but I'm a super introvert. So I love speaking, but it does take, we call this I think they call it like a solitude sandwich, where right before I'm conserving my energy so I can show up here, be full energy. And then afterward, I then, need some solitude time to conserve my energy as well. So the second is rest. And then the third is what I call PFJ, which stands for play, fun, joy. And as mentioned in my talk, I did experience childhood trauma. And I do feel like revisiting our inner child, and I call her 9-year-old Tiffany. Like, a lot of my work is dedicated to 9-year-old Tiffany, a lot of my life and what I think she would want to do. So I recently moved to LA because I see LA as like my favorite playground. There's so much creativity here, but there are just so many fun things to do here. And I think just making time for that has been really important. So I know the work of, dismantling ableism can feel very heavy, but I also have to remind myself to sit in the wins. And also, like, I'll share when we were able to get the mayoral proclamation of Disability Pride Month, I remember going to one of my other disabled friends and I was like, well, I haven't really done that much to solve like affordable housing. And again, this is in San Francisco, where that's a very big issue. And I'm like, there's still the digital divide. There's still a lot of issues around access to healthcare. And my friend's like, whoa, Tiffany. And he was like, just sit in the fact that you created this one piece of disability magic. And hopefully that planted the seed for someone else to go take that on later. And I just really appreciated that advice, because I can get caught up in all of the areas that we need to create more equity from a disability perspective. But I'm also doing what I can do in my own spheres of influence, whether it's, the fund or the Awesome Foundation, other things like that. And to remind myself, like, I'm continuing to move the needle. It's a little bit slower than I would like because we're millennials or Gen Z and we want everything to be fast, but things take time. Can I share one other last win that is a little bit unrelated to me? But as I mentioned, I started the first disability student club at Georgetown. It existed from 2009 until 2014. And at that point, there was no leadership transition. And I had already graduated from the university. I was a little bit bummed out. But in 2019, a new group of students came together to start something called the Georgetown Disability Alliance, GDA. At the same time, in 2012, again, after I graduated, there was another student who was very active about trying to get a disability cultural center at Georgetown. It didn't happen during their time as a student, but in 2023, actually this month, the Disability Cultural Center is opening at Georgetown University. So I also want to share, I think part of why I have appreciated doing this work for this long is that you are able to see progress. And I think too many people kind of burn out or get disenchanted. It's hard work, right? A lot of advocacy work pays $0 as well. And we get a lot of criticism and feedback from our community about how the way things that should be done. But I'm just appreciating that things take time. And sometimes they'll take over 10 years for something to happen, but we're planting those seeds and we have to trust that that they will grow in one way or another, even if it's with or without us.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you for your time, for sharing your inspiring story and journey with our attendees. As you saw in the chat, we've had fantastic response, and we are so appreciative to have you here with us for our 4th Horizons by Hopkins and to kick off our fantastic day. To those in attendance, be sure to stick around for the rest of the day's sessions, beginning with 2 concurrent TED Talks at 1 p.m. One is titled From Local to Global, My Journey of Taking My Career Worldwide, and the other session is called When Burnout Knocks, My Story of Resilience in a Productivity-Driven World. So you can find those Zoom links within the Whova platform and app. Again, thank you so much, Tiffany. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, safe and healthy holidays coming up, and we hope to cross paths with you in some capacity soon. And I'm definitely inspired as I'm writing my thesis to power through this. And I know a lot of our participants are also inspired by you as well.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.